Sorry, I was hiding myself.
Okay, everyone, welcome to Grue, and thank you so much for taking time and coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Yeah,
for having us,
definitely,
Rocco.
definitely. The first question is actually for Jean Jean Luc and
Yeah.
Haas. Like, what inspired you both to want to write and make the film?
You go on that, Hus.
Uh, thanks, Jean Luc. Thanks.
You're welcome.
No, I mean this was a really just I mean us meeting was sort of initiated by Cameron, who knew Jean Luc, and we all sort of in a short story, just kind of like we all met. We knew we talked about making a feature film. Jean Luc really took some time to think about the movie that we wanted to make, what we could do in Dakar. And we had an original idea that we really started working on. I think it was about 6 months. And then we kind of like threw that idea out and then came up with this whole new thing. I mean, Jean-Luc just literally called one day and it was like, I have this idea. And I was like, this sounds amazing. It was just
Mhm.
just a short summary of the thought about two Americans with bombs strapped on their chests in the streets of Dakar. And then we kind of went from there and really found the emotional core with the characters. And Jean-Luc, you said this before, but the big thing in Jean-Luc's mind was really, what would you do if met somebody you'd never met before and you had a second to tell them what you've been wanting to say your whole life. And so that was kind of like just the emotional core of the story, just for both Cam and I, our characters in the movie. And so then we just really started diving into the writing, which Jean-Luc just kind of, took initially and kind of went, and then I came in and really started sort of adding some story ideas and some writing, and that's when Jean-Luc and I really sort of figuring each other out, collaborating as writers, and really Cam's involvement too. And that was, we were all having meetings constantly and bouncing ideas around,
Oh
and
wow.
then once we found the emotional core and the emotion, the really core of the story and the emotional core, then we really knew we had something. And pretty quickly after that, I mean, we were in production. I think it was maybe
Yeah.
a year later, something like that. Yeah.
Even less than that, huh? Yeah.
Maybe it was less than that. We did have a little
Yeah.
break because of COVID, but yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. But that was basically the process and the initial vision from Jean-Luc's crazy brain.
Thank you. He answered, right? You need more than that.
Hey, I mean, hey, someone has to think of it and write it right. So hey.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's why now he
Exactly.
has to talk about it.
Yeah.
Now it's his turn.
And Cam, like you came on board for the film, and reading the script, like it's an edge of your seat thriller. Like you have these two guys with bombs on them, of course. And what are the first thoughts that you have, like reading the script for the first time?
Well, I was actually very I was we were in the very beginning when we were working on this thing. I was very aware of it the entire time. I mean,
Okay.
Goose and I were trying to make a different feature for a while, and when we came to Jean-Luc, basically it was just all we wanted to kind of do that we both kind of agreed on is we wanted to make sort of a modern Western kind of buddy movie a little
Hmm.
bit, something where with sort of a Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid ending kind of a thing which it essentially has.
Which, yeah,
And
by the way, yeah, we
um,
finally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
we kind of so with the story, I was involved in that. And when the story, was sort of as like Poos and Jean-Luc were saying, was kind of encapsulated into like this is what it's gonna be. Um Hus and Jean-Luc did the writing, from there. So we were really kind of coming together to figure something out and see what we can do in Africa. Hus and I were trying to actually make a movie in Mexico. Actually,
Oh.
it was like a Western with motorcycles set in the early 70s. So we were trying to do something kind of cool in some kind of exotic environment of some kind. And and then Africa, I was like, well, shit, Jean Luc's doing some cool stuff there. Maybe this could be like, like the Rome in the 60s, and it's going to be like a new place for like spaghetti westerns and stuff, which is kind of what Jean Luc
Kind
is
of what,
making
yeah,
happen right now. So
yeah.
it's amazing. So yeah, so none of it was a surprise to me. I was very aware of everything along the way. There were some surprises that Jean Luc threw at me, like what he wanted me to do.
Nice, nice.
Get
That's
fat.
like you're gonna get fat, you're gonna get a beard, and you're gonna dye your
Yeah.
hair. What the
He started
fuck,
sending me
man?
pictures of what the character he wanted, but I was actually really excited about it, honestly. I
Yeah.
was a little scared. It took a lot of trust that I was going to come in looking like Guy Fieri, but yeah.
Which you did. You did a good job, Cam.
Inspiration.
All these assholes would text me pictures of Guy Fieri throughout this show. Sorry, Guy, no offense. Get back your chili cheese.
Well, next time I will cast him directly. Fuck that.
Yeah.
And Jean-Luc and Hus, like the next question goes to you two again. Yeah, I mean, you have a film with basically with these two men with that have bombs attached to them, and they're listening to this voice that's telling them what they have to do. And it's like a very intense thing. And how did you create these scenes, like these very intense scenes between the voice and these two guys that have to listen to the voice?
Well, interesting enough, I think that the decision came strategically very early that we would have the first cut first before going to the actor that we want in terms of voiceover. So interestingly enough, I was pissing those guys off already on the set. Then I was adding the voice on that, right? So you can feel the frustration on them when so it plays a bit with that, which was like, this asshole is also commending us now. Right? So it probably helps on that.
It works.
Yeah. But yeah, I was the voice on the set because we needed a voice anyway. And yeah, and I think the tension of it, it's very weird for a director to say that, but some directors won't say it. But us directors, some directors don't like set, for example. I was that type of person until Zero.
Okay.
Zero was one of my favorite experience. The first time I really enjoyed a set was on my second movie on Saloom, and Zero was the one where I really enjoyed the set. But usually I don't enjoy set because as a writer, you're fighting to not lose what you wrote. But if you are in a great place, you're creating way more than what you wrote, right? And Zero was that kind of experience, which was like we were in so much crazy situation that the reality became our movie. Does it make sense? So especially for those guys, because I was living in Senegal already, but I cannot imagine what it was for them, because for me it was already crazy, right? So for two Americans, two actors, also for you being a producer on that, and also a writer, coming with that leap of faith, that's already something, right? But then you add to that the craziness of the shoot, and then the craziness of, as I know, there is no movie like that in Senegal. So that's the first, and also part of the experiment of doing this movie between the three of us and with the other producers, maybe Pamela Diop, who is another producer, or Gary Jordan, who is also another producer, was we're making a mix between an African movie, Senegalese movie, and an American movie, which was fascinating because I never saw that also, right? So everything piling together was making something new, and that new experience gave us the trust into going far. So when you ask me the question about the voice, I think it's a lot of things combined, and the craziness was just helping on that, and then of course having do I say the name of who is the voice? But then having Willem Dafoe, that was the success of Hus as a producer, which is he brought the guy that we had on the list. So that's when as a director, as a screenwriter, and as a partner that you have a great producer. He did his job. He brought the guy, and when we had the guy on the project, we were like, yeah, now we're going to what we planned in terms of quality and in terms of heights that we were planning when we were writing that. I don't even know if I'm asking if I'm answering your question entirely, but
Oh no, yeah, yeah.
I went on a lot of different things. But yeah,
It's all good.
it came from youth and it came from the craziness of that whole experience, you know. And
Wow.
again, the leap of faith of those guys coming in Senegal and being able to give everything, you know, which is not that easy.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. And like the next question is for Cam and also Hus to like, how do you get like you two are basically playing like these guys, and how do you get into a headspace for that? Because it's like a very scary thing. Like you have these two guys that are fighting for their lives, and this voice is telling them to do things that they don't want to do. And how do you get into like a mind frame, a headspace to play these kind of roles?
Can we start who's a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it was a really interesting thing because we had this story, and then in terms of writing the story, the three of us collaborating on the story, and then jumping into that process of like, okay, now I got to play this character,
Hmm.
and the preparation involved with that. And I think, I'll answer for myself, but I think it's probably true for Cameron a little bit too, which is like, you start prepping for this thing and getting ready to go to Dakar and really, wanting to do the best job you can as an actor, right? And sort of coming with these ideas about what you want to do. And then really, I mean, for me, it was getting there and even on the first day of shooting and going into that first week, it was like everything I came with, all the ideas I came with were, for me anyways, just thrown out the window. Like it turned into this whole different animal. And really, for me, it was just sort of like the being thrown into Dakar, into the streets of Dakar,
Hmm.
just being like with surreal surroundings. There was that natural thing of just sort of like I need to make it through this day, right? And I think Cameron and I were both dirty and sweaty and bloody and sick and all so it was really, I mean, there was that thing for me personally, which was like, okay, if I could get through this day and get to tomorrow, we're in good shape. And so I think
Yeah.
that really just sort of naturally helped with the process of feeling like, okay, I'm I got 10 hours to live kind of thing, right? And if I can make it to that point, we'll see what happens. So I think it was really natural, like a natural process, but I did come with a lot of like preconceived ideas about what I was going to do, and then everything just flew out the window. And then at the end of the day, it's like really trusting Jean Luc as a director, like giving him all of our trust just
Hmm.
to get us through the day, right? So we could be there the next day and keep going. So that was the process for me. I don't know, Cameron.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of time, before we actually shot, and I got to give credit to Jean Luc on this, big credit. He's obviously a very visual director. Often directors kind of seem to fall into two camps where the super visual ones tend to be a little bit less concerned maybe with the actors, and then vice versa with sort of a John Cassavetes kind of a thing, where it's just kind of like not as much on the visual, but more about, emotional. And Jean-Luc spent a lot of time preparing us for this thing, and he would always send me things. Just it could be anything. It could be just
Fuck with you.
wardrobe, or, yeah, just he really he really cared about he really cared about the emotional life of these guys and what was going on inside of them, not just the externals. So it was really exciting for me. I mean, it was scary as hell because I felt like I was taking some chances, obviously, with this thing. And we really experimented a lot too with the tone of it as well, and so when we got there, it's like it's not a big stretch to be thrown in the middle of the streets of Dakar with all this shit show, this
Oh
amazing
yeah. Oh
sensory
yeah.
overload. you don't have to like, it's not like you're in front of a fucking green screen or something. You're in the middle of you're in the stuff. And if we look kind of befuddled and sweaty and out of sorts, it's not a big stretch, where we were. Um, but yeah, I gotta, there was a long process, and Jean-Luc was very involved in it all along the way. So I got to give him hats off on that. It's
Thank you.
awesome.
And Jean-Luc, like the last question I got is actually for you. Like, I'm a big fan of music and films, the scores. And how did you know like the score, the sound that you wanted for this film?
So interestingly enough, that's where I knew Cameron before doing the movie. I didn't know Hus before.
Okay.
And like Hus said, we found ourselves in the writing. We found ourselves, the three of us, on the shooting and preparing those characters and all that, like Cam said.
Hmm.
And then in post-production, I'm an ex-musician. I love music. That's my first love, way before
Oh, all right.
movies. I'm also an editor, so it's not a hazard, meaning like there's something with rhythm, right? And that movie was also about rhythm, and of course it's called Zero, so it's also about rhythm and all this. But my discussion with you was, I want the nature of the movie to also be the rhythm of the movie, meaning like this is a mixed race film.
Yeah.
So meaning this is an American slash African movie, and I don't want it to be too much African in the music, but I don't want it to be too much Westerny in the music, right? So I need to
Makes
find a
sense.
needle. And we were doing research with Hus, and then he came with that with this group from it's a movement from the 70s and the 60s called the Zamrock.
Okay.
So it's from Zambia. And I knew it from afar, but I never studied that much. And when he sent me one or two tracks, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's exactly that." Which is there's that sense of a Western influence in terms of a rock and all this, but in the same time, it's very African, you
Hmm.
know. And we knew we had that at that moment. We were like, "This is exactly the movie." And then we started to yeah, built everything around that in terms of editing. I mean, so it's always a big part for me as a writer, as a director, and as an editor to find the music very early. But on Zero, I knew that it would come, and the most important thing, like Cameron said, was
Yeah.
I need to find the emotional art of the movie with those characters first, and then the rhythm will come in the editing because you're also, or at least I'm already editing when I'm shooting, so I knew where I was going, and I already had the music in my head, but I couldn't, and we didn't have AIs at that moment, and I wouldn't use it anyway. But I knew what type of music I wanted, but I didn't knew what was the name of this type of music. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And use as the key to that. So it came with the key, and I was like, that's exactly that, you know. So yeah, that's how it came. And thank you for noticing it because that's something that we really really are precise with. Like we
Oh,
really want
yeah.
the people to notice that in the movie, and for the people who will stay until the end of the credits, the voice is also playing a bit with this music. So there's a surprise at the end of the movie. So stay until the end of the credits, and you're gonna have fun until the end about that.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on, and when
Thank you,
can
Rocco.
fans expect to see the movie?
Thank you, Rocco.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
you'll see it April 11th. It comes
Thanks.
out April 11th on in theaters and on digital in the
Awesome.
US. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
guys. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Rocco.
Rocco. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you, Rocco.
Uh, all right, thanks for setting everything up. I'll see you later.
Thanks, man.
Thank you,
Thank
Rocco.
you, buddy.